Okay, good evening, gentlemen. It's very nice to see all of you come on to this forum. It's always nice to connect with the with your colleagues and people I consider great friends. Um, I think it's that time of the year when we've seen a lot of racial unrest over the past few months, which is nothing new to us. I mean, we've experienced this for years, for as long as we've been alive, as far as I'm
Mhm.
concerned. So, I mean, the objective of the forum is simply to come up with working solutions that can help us combat systemic racism. And I don't think there's a better place than going to the community and having candid discussions about what happens or what's happening in our corporations, and finding ways to, just leverage ourselves, like lean on each other, and trying to find and create a safe space for ourselves in such a way that we can actually even communicate with our white colleagues. So at the end of the day, this is to benefit all of us, but ideally we're here to find solutions amongst ourselves. So let me start off with introduction. So maybe I'll go to Ricardo and we're going to go all the way around.
Yeah, so I'm Ricardo, last name Rose. I've worked with quite a few of you guys on this panel tonight, I think with the exception of Terry, but it's always nice to meet new people. I'm really looking forward to, hearing from you guys and getting your perspectives on not just what are the problems, but also what are some of the solutions, especially since we all work in the same industry. So there's a lot of common ground. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what your guys' perspectives are. And I know even for guys like Mike and Ryan, who I've worked very closely with, we've had a lot of conversations about, some of the challenges that we have faced at work and, some of the challenges we faced in life at large. So, it's good to maybe share some of that in an open and safe space. And yeah, let's get it going.
Very good. Maybe want to go to Mike.
Hello, hello, Michael Douglas. Everybody knows me, works with me, calls me MD for short. Um, to echo what Ricardo was saying, it was always, we thank God when they came on, I had people to collaborate with and talk about this, because prior to that, it was pretty lean. People that look like yourself, pretty lean. It was pretty much, actually Kevin. We worked before, and he's actually one of my managers before. So, it was slim pickings when it came to people that look like you and or, share similar instances and similar occurrences. So it was kind of great. So right now I'm taking care of the concierge department in Toronto, and it's a great forum to kind of discuss this because certain things we spoke up about, certain things we kind of quiet about, because in the workplace you kind of never know how it would be taken. So it was a little bit of uncomfortableness on our part as well to try to fit in, and people kind of trying to navigate waters when talking to us. So it was always a difficult conversation, and I'm glad you kind of came up with this forum to discuss and for us to share our opinions.
Very good. Maybe we can move over to Keaton. You ready?
Sure, yeah. Keaton, pleasure to meet you guys. Um, I have been in the industry for about 7 years now, and I'm excited to kind of be a part of this discussion to learn and if I may be an asset to anyone here.
Very good. It's nice to have you. Well, I guess I can go to my introductions. First of all, I'm Kevin. I've worked in aviation I rather worked in aviation for a very long period of time. And I joined the consulting business not too long ago. And my focus is mainly going to be in management consulting with a focus on inclusive leadership. What that really means is simply trying to get inclusive participation for, Blacks and marginalized communities in the corporate boardrooms and in our corporations, because we're underrepresented. So just starting to have those conversations, creating awareness, and education, which is simply what's pretty much lacking. a large amount of education. People are not really educated on, or rather, we really don't understand each other, and that's the reason why we're pretty much at where we're at. So maybe I'll bounce back off to Ryan so he can complete his intros. And I just want to remind you guys, we're here to talk about industry in general. So Ryan, over to you, man.
Okay, sorry for that interruption, guys. So it's Ryan Johnson. I've worked with Ricardo with other areas in the airport before that. Started actually at the airport in 2014. Yeah, but echo both what MD Ricardo has said. Having a discussion, being able to express some of the things that you've kind of faced with similar people, then we can actually make some changes and come up with some solutions to things that we face. Yep. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Very good. I just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and safe. So feel free to be as candid as you want to be. I mean, this is something that will benefit all of us. And I want us to really dive into what's really the big elephant in the room, right? And we know there's a big elephant in the room, especially when you go back into your workspaces. So it's largely due to the fact that we really don't talk about race. And we need to be talking about race. We got to talk about race. And if you're facing such outcomes right now where we're largely underrepresented, then there's got to be a conversation on why that the outcomes. So I'm simply going to dive into some of the questions that I sent out, and let's first of all try and consider times when we encountered some type of racial barrier, and while you're working or interacting within, like in this example, the aviation sector. So maybe we can go to Ricardo. You want to go first?
Yeah, I don't mind. So for me, Ryan and I started at the same time. That was pretty much my introduction into the aviation world. I'd always been a customer, but actually working for an airline, that was a whole new experience for me, starting back in March 2019 and being launched into a management capacity where I'm actually supervising not just the operation, but also people, and working directly with customers as well. That's also an interesting piece, just from the perspective of having to deal with multiple types of personalities, backgrounds, cultural, ethnic, etc. For me, I have many examples that I can maybe think about in terms of barriers, but I would probably want to just speak firstly to the fact that prior to joining, similar to what MD said earlier, it came to my attention, really wasn't much representation in the management side of the operation. So, when we came in, it was almost like a literal breath of fresh air for a lot of people, but that can also have an impact on the way of thinking that you have coming into work, because you almost wonder, what is my real role, or what is it that I'm really here to do? Or, am I part of an initiative or something HR related to kind of fill a certain, so that's the kind of thinking you sometimes come to work with, and you start thinking not just about your job in the purest sense, but also sometimes like maybe there's an ulterior motive to why I was hired versus somebody else. There's other instances as well. For the sake of time, I just wanted to give a couple examples from my experience.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that, Ricardo. To Mike.
So for me, I think more outwardly occasions, it has been more customer based, with what, pretty much Ricardo was saying. People try to pull weight and kind of, I've had that reverse racism question for someone was diverse, but when you're playing it by the book, the rules are rules that applies to everybody. So I just wanted to make that apparent. And some people try to strong arm you and try to push and negotiate. Think there's someone higher up to speak with. Don't respect your authority when it comes to that. That's more customer based. you know, for me, in terms of working in this environment and seeing anything direct, that's been the difficult part, the direct one. Like you know, if there's anything, it's not really shown on the surface. It could be something behind that we don't know, that kind of factor. That's, you know, my perception with that, because, you know, people, I guess in management, they're cognizant about how to come across professionally, and to maybe not share certain values, things that they have in mind, or perceptions that they have in mind outwardly, to public. It could be in closed circles. So I think when we looked at that standpoint, when we're talking about looking at tiers, like there's a lot of entry level management, and we look at the tier above that, it becomes leaner and leaner. And you know, when you look at that and you ask yourself, why is it? Is it, you know, I'm sure a lot of us are totally qualified and that as well. And things start coming to your mind. Is there anything else that I could be doing? I know for us, my perception is, and so it's not directly related to that, but I feel that what I need to do and come to work, I got to be that much more professional than others just to be equal. And to shine, not to shine. I try to be myself natural, but I don't want to drop the guard down, because you just don't want to have that angry, you know, the whole quote, angry black person quote, right? So you got to be ultra professional just to be on par with your colleagues. So in a nutshell, nothing direct in aviation that I feel so far in terms of working with my peers, but more on the customer front.
Thanks, Mike. Bring up some really good points. Where we, I think a majority of us, and this is right across most corporations, especially in Canada, you're not really going to experience overt racism. You're just going to experience the subtle, the aversive racism, the subtle racism, where you know, the higher you go in the ladder, the less diverse it is. It's as simple as that. And there's really no reason why that's the case. To your point, a lot of us are largely qualified, sometimes even a lot more qualified than our white colleagues. And at some point, you start questioning, why is this happening to people that look like me? And you know, you cannot aspire to be something that you don't really see represented, right? And it can, our minds are largely unconscious. So for the most part, you can only aspire to be where you see yourself represented. And so if a majority of us are only coming in and all you see is entry level positions, then you know exactly how far you're going to go, right? So which sometimes may drive a lot of people that look like us to just hit the exit button sometimes, right? I mean, I know so many managers who've joined the aviation sector over the years, and you know, I worked in aviation for many years, and they left. And
We're stagnant,
they left.
you know, we're just maintaining that course.
Yeah, they simply, a majority of us will just simply just leave and exit and try and redraw our environments. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of corporations are losing some serious talent because people are not really consciously paying attention to the picture. I mean, but then again, people are unconscious about it. You cannot heal what you don't feel. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm the HR, if I'm the HR rep at a company and I'm not really qualified to really do an equity analysis towards the policy, like hiring practices, or if I'm not paying attention to my talent pool and where I'm hiring from, the results are likely going to be skewed, and you're going to have a lot more people who look like me. And if the representation within your HR department is largely a white population, then you can only imagine what the result is. By the end of the day, I don't think people are really paying attention to it. I think it's unintentional sometimes. But then again, we got to create awareness. And if we don't create awareness, and where all of us are complicit by just being silent,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to be seen as the angry white guy, or
Right.
as the angry black person,
Yeah.
and you don't want to feed that stereotype. You're confided to that corner where you want to be professional, convey a professional image, and don't get in the mud with it,
Yeah.
right?
But
So,
companies are working. If I want to add a point there, companies, I mentioned a conference call that they had recently about diversity and inclusion, and that was one of the major things they spoke about, like retaliation, right? But good paths are being made, saying that, you know what, you need to bring it out, and it's really about the uncomfortableness on both sides, but to at least bring it out, have that conversation, so what's uncomfortable now becomes less uncomfortable, and you kind of share each side of the story, your feelings, which makes you feel better at the end of the day once you get it off your chest, what it is that you're concerned about.
Yeah, and
I
I
mean,
agree 100%. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's fine. I was actually going to say, since Terry just joined us, maybe he can do his intros and jump on to the first question. So we're simply addressing times when you've had some type of racism or a racist experience interacting within your role, and how you dealt with it.
All right, guys, I do apologize. My computer completely shut down before, so apologize for joining late. Just some background on myself. I've been 16 years in aviation. I've done quite a bit of divisions within the aviation industry, starting from ramp straight up the resource and deployment, and now with corporate. I know we're covering barriers. Some of the barriers, and I know that you guys have touched on it, was a lack of diversity at the senior executive level. Okay, for me coming in, right, wanting to move up, right, the first barrier is I look at my hierarchy and I don't see anybody that looks like me. So that kind of right off the bat stipulates how far up the chain I'm going to be able to achieve. Another thing I think that's also hurting our community is this perception of our capabilities. I notice I say perception because this perception usually stems from outside the industry. It puts a mark on you so that when you're inside the industry, people already assume or have an idea of who you are. And I'll give you an example, inability to articulate what you're meaning. Well, you know what? Some people look at it as this individual has an accent. We can't advance him because we have a problem understanding what he's saying. Okay. And I've seen many people 20, 25 years in stepped over for promotions for the sole reason is that they were deemed to be unable to communicate. Now, the thing is, the communication is 100% on point. The problem is because the person may have an accent, right? The individuals listening may have to pay a little bit more attention to understand what he's saying. But the knowledge that this particular person could bring, is outstanding, and we're losing on that talent, right? And it's unfortunate that there is not enough of us in positions at a certain level for people to get accustomed to how we sound, accustomed to, the way we speak, that will make the path easier for other people. One of the things that I notice, and I'm going to say our community, is that if I get together with, let's say, a bunch of West Indians at work, all of a sudden we're in the corner, accents are coming out. You know how we are as a people. We're loud, we talk, we joke, we have fun. That's just who we are, right? And at the end of the day, I have other individuals coming to me and saying, well, I don't understand. How come all of a sudden you guys are over there and you guys are talking in all your accents? So the truth is, we're our own worst enemies because we don't present ourselves as who we are. We feel that in order to fit in, we need to conform to what, I guess, the executive perception of professionalism is. And at the end of the day, we're robbing ourselves. because now individuals coming from the islands who this is their accent and how they sound, you know, the executives never had to dealt with it. They don't understand it. They struggle to understand it. And now you're deemed, you know, incapable or don't have the requirements to meet executive level standards. Okay, so for myself, that's one of the huge barriers that I see in the industry as well. I'll give you another example. When I was moving into management, right, as you could see, I have dreadlocks. One of the first things one of my coworkers said to me was, listen, man, why do you want to go do something like that? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, look, man, do you see anybody at a senior level that looks like you? They're going to make you cut your hair. They're going to make you do this. You know what? I took the step forward because it's what I wanted. But just that fear alone is stopping people from trying to get to that next level because they fear that they're going to be forced to change who they are. So they stay where they are. So I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, but once again, it's just education, right? People fear what they're not used to. If they don't get used to us, they're going to fear us. They won't understand who we are, and we're going to keep seeing these issues.
I mean,
But just a couple of things that I'm seeing, yeah.
Terry, you bring up some really good points, especially when you start mentioning accents and the way you look, how you carry yourself. But I find that this is a misguided perception where people have to remember that white is also a culture. So there's certain things that white people do, and there's certain things that black people do. And for some reason, people are inclined to try and fit into this homogeneous thought or idea where we convey a certain image, and that's where we get to a point where someone is actually widening themselves to be accepted, to be part of the boys club. Whatever happened to being your authentic self, you don't have to conform to a certain standard to articulate yourself or to convey your message. If someone is actually of the opinion that you cannot convey your message because of the way you sound or the way you look, can you imagine how much they're losing on a consistent basis? Just think about all the billionaires that you know out there that are not Caucasian. Has nothing to do with the way you sound, has nothing to do with the way you look. I mean, intelligence has nothing to do with how you sound or what you convey, right? So I think sometimes it's almost the people are not patient enough, and it's a certain culture that tells you that they're not patient enough to listen to what you have to offer. And I think we also live in a society where we are not allowed to be as authentic as we can be, just because of the stereotypes that have been fed around people that look like us. So there's a stereotype that's by default out there when someone looks at a black male or a black female. So, which is largely unconscious, but it's being perpetuated for years. You've been fed, I mean, we've been fed a ton of media that shows negative images about blacks. So of course you automatically download and you associate that accent, those dreads, how you sound, how loud you are, to they have certain connotations to white people. But then again, it's only because we haven't had that discussion with them. We've been so silent about it. No one's really had a chance to educate them or put them in an uncomfortable situation in such a way that they really get to understand who we are. And it starts from a very young age. Just look at our education system. I mean, if you go out there, you're going to realize we're largely educated on white culture. So we're slowly washing ourselves away, and no one's paying attention to it. And then we get into a situation where our white colleagues, who we want to get along with, come in, and now you're uncomfortable showing your true self. I mean, people are only as productive as their true selves. As soon as you're authentic, then you're going to start seeing productivity. So maybe, did I touch base on Ryan? Because I don't think we touched base on Ryan before we go back to Ricardo. And then we'll let Keaton say something. So Ryan, you want to take?
I totally agree with what everyone has said so far. The experience is the same. The issues that everyone has mentioned, individual, is the same. That I think that we all encountered in one form or another. I remember one instance I was getting on the train that brings us to a parking lot, and passenger was in a wheelchair, and the question was to me, "Oh, what do you do?" Right? It was myself and another colleague. We were on the train, and when I explained to her what we did, you could see the shift eye, and she stopped speaking to us automatically, as if to say that, "Oh, you shouldn't. How could you be doing that?" And I shook my head with my colleague. It's just a perception. Like they said, there's a perception that we have only a certain capability, or we can only do certain things. That the perception there, where again, as I think it's Terry was saying, we also is we don't see the representations of ourselves in higher tiers, and others don't see it. So not just we're not seeing it, but others are not seeing it as well. So yes, partially it's on them, but because they're also not seeing it, so their default is that, how can you be in that position? I don't see anybody like that in that position, right? And another one of the barriers I think we face, Kerry talked about, is that stereotyping, that automatically somebody has a perception of who you are before you even start the job, and what you can or cannot do, or what you're capable of. And sometimes you face even more scrutiny. When he talked about people not getting positions in higher positions to go higher within the company in corporate areas, and people that have been passed over, for example, he said, because of how they speak. And I've seen for myself, colleagues of mine at my previous job, where there was a higher level of scrutiny the moment they started to move and decided that they wanted to move up. And everything becomes more scrutinized, where compared to their white colleague, and they be doing the same thing, because I watch it and they're doing the same thing, and I'm just like, why are you more watching what he's doing when they're both doing the exact same thing? So definitely, I think off the bat, there's a stereotype that goes before us, unconsciously, like Kevin says. I don't think that everybody actually goes out thinking this is what we're gonna do. It's largely unconscious. And Kevin said, like, I was thinking about it last night. You can't fix a problem if you don't think it's a problem, right? So if I'm in upper management, or I'm the CEO of a company, if I don't think that this is a problem, then there is no problem to fix. I won't implement anything because I don't see it as a problem. So we have to have those conversations, like you guys were saying, those uncomfortable conversations, so people can actually see that, yeah, it is a problem. And then we can actually start to move forward from there. Yeah, I got some more, but I'll give somebody else a chance to talk.
Very good. Thanks, Ryan. I just want to see, Keen, did you have anything to share?
I don't want to belabor the point here. I guess everyone's been saying a little bit of everything. A lot of Black representation. I think Michael mentioned this, only on the entry level to management, and nothing more. I've seen more of our LGBT community being going up in higher levels. I've seen people that are bad mouthing the company that have been given management positions. I've seen that only the Black representation are only, I guess we're only seen to do bare minimum successfully. But yeah, I haven't really seen much representation, yeah, at least in my company. And for me, it hasn't been. It's not that we're not competent, because I know there's a number of people that I could say are more than capable and more than competent to do the well be able to serve that position as a management or even upper as an executive. But I think there's like a viewpoint, or I think there's an agenda rather that companies inherit, and the way they see Black people in the community, or at least in their corporation. I feel like we're just not well represented, and we're not given an opportunity, I don't think.
Very good. Thanks, Keen. I just wanted to touch base again on Ryan. You brought up a really good point, and this I found interesting. When you had that interaction on the train, where your reaction is something that we all do. So you simply laughed it off. Did you realize that? You simply laughed that situation off, because a lot of us end up in the same bubble where someone will say something very racist, and our minds are conditioned in such a way that the first thing you're going to do is you're going to protect yourself. And the best way that we protect ourselves is by not aggravating it, because we've already been conditioned to the consequences of aggravating a solution. Did you realize that?
Yep.
It's almost on a consistent basis where we choose a plot of we simply play. It's you're trying to exit that situation because you know it's not going to serve any purpose to you, or will not even advance your interests. And think about it. You do that on a consistent basis, even when you're not being attacked. If you feel a situation is unfair to you, you will likely laugh it off and you'll just move on. And keep in mind, we do this on a consistent basis with, in multiple interactions. So we got to be conscious about these things. And I would suggest that we start speaking up a lot more, right? However, I think we have an opportunity where we can reach out to our white colleagues and maybe start the conversation, because that's just simply not right. You can only imagine if someone was to say that to a white colleague, if you're to flip the tables now and see what reaction they'll perhaps get. I mean, it's incredible what we hear on a daily basis, but we ignore it. I think Ricardo wanted to say something. Do you want to add on something?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. I was actually writing down a couple of my thoughts just because, so many great things were shared. So if you permit me, I just want to share a couple of them and maybe just one more experience. Firstly, if I could just be frank, and maybe some of my peers here would agree, I think there is a general perception that corporate work is considered white space. And if you do happen to work in a place that is maybe more multicultural, or maybe, it's not just, white people in in spaces of leadership, it's probably perceived as not very successful, or maybe it's a startup, or maybe it's, there's just a perception, and I don't necessarily know why, because I do know a lot of very successful Black people who work in corporate environments, and they do very well, even though they might work in very white spaces, if you will. I also just wanted to share that I do think as you just brought up with respect to Ryan's experience. You know, I think part of the reason why we laugh it off is just because, you know, we're in a day and age right now where you almost can't believe certain things still need to be discussed. It's almost like you can't believe that. How can you possibly think of me that way in 2020? How can you possibly think it's okay for you to talk to me like that? It's like, why was I brought here? So I think, once again, if we start having more of these conversations in a very intentional and open way, without bringing judgment to those who, you know, maybe some of our white colleagues. So I think that's the other side of the discussion that needs to be very clear. A lot of our white colleagues may not necessarily know the challenges that we're facing, or may not even understand it. They may know of it, but may not understand it. We shouldn't bring judgment to them in their ignorance, or, you know, for their lack of understanding, because a lot of it is context. A lot of it is, you know, some of my white colleagues, they don't really have Black friends. So they go off of what they see on CNN or on CP24. And I'm like, you know, so you still kind of scratch your head like, come on, man. Like we're not all like that. We're not all criminals. We're not all bandits trying to steal and be lazy on the job. No, a lot of us actually add value to, you know, to the environments that we work in. But it's not necessarily just because, you know, I'm Black and I need a position, or I'm Black, I need to be promoted. It's the fact that we need to start realizing what it is that we actually do, and on a daily basis, and the overall value that we add, not just because of the color of my skin, but also because of what I bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Ricardo. Those are some really good points. Thanks for your candidness as well. That was a good laugh as well. I think you bring up some great points, especially when we consider the fact that the stereotypes that are fed about Black people are things that both white and Black people watch. So I believe, a huge lack of education creates nothing but ignorance. So why are whites in a situation where they don't really understand Blacks? And we got to get to the bottom of it. And it's because they're nurtured in such a way from a very young age, including Blacks, where we consider got to fit in within that white space for you to excel. But it's only because that's all we see on a consistent basis. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the Harvard developed an implicit admin test, and I'm not sure if any one of you have ever taken it. And you can go in there and you're gonna surprise yourself. It's a free test. Just type it in. IAT should come up, and you can test your unconscious bias instantly, and it'll tell you what kind of biases you have, whether it's religion, color, you name it. They got all kinds of assessment tests. And I would encourage every single one of you to take that test, because you're going to realize that you've been conditioned in such a way that you got distrust for Black people, even as Black people. We got to start considering what we are consciously thinking about on a consistent basis, simply a result of what we've been fed on a consistent basis. It's conditioned over and over again. So everyone is biased to some extent. Everyone's privileged to some extent. We just got to start paying a lot more attention to what we're privileged to and what we're unconscious about. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping an eye on the time. We got about, we veered off the time. It's 7:53. Can we perhaps think about top 3 barriers that you can consider that you've seen that are affecting Black professionals in aviation? Maybe we'll go to Mike first.
Top 3 barriers. Wow. I think one of them is people's perception of perhaps we're not as educated as like Ivy League schools and whatnot, right? And they don't really look at they don't look at the resume. They just kind of feel that. And again, this is my perception of how I feel. It's and that's why we always got to kind of boast for what we've been through, our skills and our education to be considered for this. for any kind of promotion and whatnot. We gotta be careful of how we speak. We gotta sound, cross our T's and dot our I's with everything. Now, another barrier is
How do you think? Sorry, don't mean to interrupt. You should be correcting that.
Oh, sorry, you're cutting out there.
So how do you think we should deal with that? So there's a perception that we're not competent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what do you think is the best way to approach this? So if the perception is there, do we really understand where it's coming from? What does it stem from? And how do we overcome that barrier? Like, how do we overcome someone's perception? I can understand
We
ignorance,
need to
but
try to better understand it, like extract that from them, ask those questions, do you mind if I ask, what it is exactly that you're looking for from their standpoint, and see if that answer will be authentic or not, or they're going to stumble across it because now you might have untapped something that they were internally hiding, right? So that's one thing with that, because the perception for us, we're great at doing, the grunt work and everything like that, but when it comes to decision making, strategic planning and whatnot, we're not thought of first to complete those tasks. So yeah, and it's having that difficult conversation, try to better understand them, kind of make them work for it, right? To try to get that answer, to better understand what you could be doing better, what they're looking for, and if your qualifications I got those qualifications there, is there anything I could do, special assignment or whatever the case, to kind of prove the case. Even though you shouldn't be doing that, it should be based on merit and qualification.
But do you think the same opportunities passed on equitably to white people? Do you think they're questioned on being strategic, like your white colleagues? I mean, if they're not doing it, why should you be subject to the same thing?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, that's that's the mystery with that.
And that's what I'm saying. So we end up in a situation where we're almost being complicit in the system. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the unofficial established system where we got to prove ourselves, and another race in this card, it's almost like you're being handed out a deck of cards. Do you see what I'm saying? Like if you have to prove yourself
consistently,
and someone else does not have to prove themselves, then how's that fair to you? Because at the end of the day, can you imagine how many times someone may just choose not to prove themselves just because they see that those opportunities are lacking?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we got to start thinking about these things, because we go out of our way to prove our resume, and Blacks are largely educated and still not getting the positions, right? And then you're faced with a situation where someone has less of the experience or less of the education, and you're about 20 layers ahead of you with no justification at all. Maybe perhaps we got to start maybe questioning some of these policies, because these policies are not going to change, and not really ever going to change if we become part of it. So maybe I can bring Terry in, and you can perhaps just put in your comments.
Yeah, so the perception topic, to me, it's huge, and it stems outside the industry. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I don't know you. I don't know you at all. But from media tells me you're a bad guy. Human nature is that we fear the unknown. Okay, so now you show up to me and you want a job without me even knowing you. I'm afraid of you. Why? Because what the world has showed me your culture is about. Right? So I mean, for us to have to make a change and change the perception, it steps way outside of the organization. It's a whole global issue, right? Where do we stand? How does the media portray us, right? we're already behind the 8 ball because you know what? I've never stolen anything in my life. I've busted my butt for everything I have. I've tried to do as much as education as I could afford. But yet when I walk in there, because of how the world perceives me, right? The guy next to me that doesn't have half my qualifications, nobody's afraid of him,
Yep.
but they're afraid of me.
If
So we have to change this perception.
I sorry to interject with Terry. I just wanted to agree with
Yeah, go
that.
ahead.
Add to there is this big perception, like you said, that is shown about us, and it's funny that the same type of things can, if you actually do research, you can see that the same type of things that are projected of us can be seen in other cultures as well, but it's not shown. It's not the narrative that's placed out there, right? They don't show the narrative of that culture in that light. It's crazy. I'm going to give an example it's outside of the industry. It's just again, where you're thought of to be the criminals or the bad guy. And I remember my friend and I were actually in our uniforms, security, right? And we were standing outside waiting for the restaurant to open to have breakfast. We had been working overnight. This truck pulls up. Before that, actually, I watched the lady in the store beside gingerly, because again, it's early mornings, go to the door and close it because we were standing there outside. And it so happened that not long after that, this van pulls up with these guys in the back, white guys. Hey, we got these TVs, man. We're supposed to deliver them. You guys want them? Like, we'll give it to you. This, and I looked at myself and look at the criminal right there.
Absolutely correct.
Look at the criminal right there.
Absolutely correct.
Right? Yet still, I'm the one that you perceive as the criminal.
Brother, listen, I'll give you an example of something that happened to me at the airport on a break while I'm in uniform. I'm standing outside you know, getting some fresh air. Bunch of people around me, a bunch of people around me. 2 guys approach me out of everybody around me to ask me if I have rolling papers.
Mm-hmm.
To ask me if I have rolling papers. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on a minute. We got about 30 people outside, and out of everyone in this crowd, I'm in uniform. You're coming to ask me if I have rolling papers. Where does that come from?
Perception.
100% perception, man.
Right? We
It's
need to change.
100%.
That's where we need to change. Right now,
It's
imagine I'm
largely-
going into a job, right? Now, this is some stranger that doesn't even know me, but now I'm applying into an executive position, right? How many people on that panel am I sitting in front of who don't know me, right? But yet in the back of their head, they have this perception of, well, this guy's got locks, man. You know, he must be rolling something.
Chronic.
Mm-hmm.
I must say, Terry, that's 100%, almost on a consistent basis, and I think every single one of us has probably experienced that at some point in our lives. But we got to start thinking about. So we know we have this narrative out there, right? How do we change the narrative? So we know that people make all these assumptions about you, which are largely misguided. These conceptions are largely misguided. They're all misconceptions, which tells me that, there's a sincere lack of education. But how do we bridge them? How do we bridge these guys across? Because at the end of the day, the only person that can change the narrative is us. It's not going to be them, but we're going to need them to change the narrative. Because we got to remember, a lot of sincere of our white colleagues, just they don't really know. Because Terry, I can almost guarantee you they've seen so many clips, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's by the media, where people like us are rolling up a couple of joints. And you gotta remember, we're largely represented when it comes to negative outcomes, right? There's almost an obsession with negativity tied to Black people.
Yep.
So we know exactly where it's coming from. But how do we change the narrative? We got to start thinking about that consciously, because the only way we can change the narrative is by being part of the conversation and not laughing things off. And we got to be able to speak up and let them know when it's not okay. Because if we don't, we're going to end up in the same cycle, man. Mike, did you want to say something?
By letting it slide, you're being passive, and it's not going to get resolved. By strategically saying, you know what, oh, sorry, what did you mean by that? I just want to better understand, why that comment was made. To kind of put them on the spot, then make them feel uncomfortable and present it to them and how it made you feel. That's one thing that was brought up before, because no one really knows how we feel, right? If it's not addressed, and it means that it's not bothering you, and let it slide. And for people continually to say these microaggressions, like we spoke about in a conversation earlier, right? Microaggressions take shape and form in many various ways. Stuff about, what's your background? Where do you come from? About your hair? Can I touch your hair? Different things like that, right? And, we really want to find out what's the point? Like, why do you want to know about that? Is it for good intentions or for something that you might use against me? That type of thing like that. So it's speaking up and trying to inquire a little bit more their angle and direction with that certain question or comment to better understand and to use that opportunity to correct. I didn't feel quite comfortable about that. Not too sure if you're aware of that, but this is the way I perceive this. And it puts them back and think about, what, I never thought about that direction. I just, I'm open to ask questions, but certain questions are not appropriate. And if they don't know it's appropriate, then they just continue on forward with it.
But we got to do that on a consistent basis. It's got to be a lot of us saying the same thing, because if they don't face that kind of discomfort, from a ton of us, then they will be saying that to someone else, right? Yeah. So if it's just Michael saying it, we're done.
Michael's got a problem.
We need to clone Michael about too many times for this message to get across. But we got to start thinking about those kind of things and talking to our Black colleagues and making sure that people understand that we are complicit by not talking about these things. And I get it. I mean, the stereotype about Black males and getting into confrontations can rub you off the wrong way, and it's automatic that mentally you're trying to protect yourself, because the consequences that come with Black males and confrontation. So ideally, then, to Terry's example there, you're simply trying to avoid a confrontation. It's as simple as that, which is easier for everyone. But then again, we perpetuate a message that's going to be bad for us in the long term. But we must also consider our environment as well, right? I think these are some great examples where we can throw the ball back into their court and have them taste the discomfort to understand that it's not okay. It's not okay. What you're saying is not okay, and it's 2020. You shouldn't be saying that, right? I think Ricardo, you got a couple of notes taken there. You want to say something?
Yeah, I'm the big notes guy. Like, I have all my stuff written here. Kevin, for me, I think a lot of powerful things have been shared. And I think, talking about solutions is very important, but, just to make sure that, I lay some groundwork for what I'm about to say, the key thing tonight, I think, and maybe one of the biggest takeaways for me is no more laughing it off. No more laughing it off. And, Ryan, I worked closely with Ryan for a long time, so he knows my style. I am the king of making people feel uncomfortable, because for me, I think we have to start taking responsibility as an individual in society today. We have to bring responsibility back. We have to make responsibility great again, make accountability great again. So if that, we're talking about perception, but there's also a lot of ignorance, arrogance, as well as just, you know, just lack of awareness about, you know, how they're being perceived. So I think, once again, we also need to take accountability and responsibility to address certain issues on our side, because unfortunately, a lot of people, until they're made uncomfortable, or until, or more specifically, they're put into a position where they actually have to consider their actions, consider their way of thinking, there's not going to be any movement. Unfortunately, we're just always going to be on opposite sides of the table. Just as, so I'm giving you the other side of it. It's not all negative. Sometimes people do see, there are some people who do consider that, yeah, maybe there needs to be a change. Maybe there does need to be more diversity and inclusion, but it's just the fact there isn't really a forum for those kind of conversations to happen in a very open and public space. So one of the solutions I was suggesting is organizations should start having more open forums. Now, I know openness is a very cliche word because everybody says they have an open door policy, but the reality is, because of corporate politics and political correctness, you have to say the right things in those open forums. So it's not really open. But I think if we, as a community, as a people, whatever you will, if we start having more of these discussions amongst ourselves, and then now showing people like, look, these are the kind of conversations that do need to happen. I think that if we start bridging some of those gaps in the corporate workspace by having these conversations amongst ourselves first and then bringing it to them, it would help them see, like, look, it is possible for Black people to, one, communicate, to be not only professional, but to also be very cohesive and clear in how they actually want to come across. And finally, I also wrote down here as well, the lack of representation, not just in management, but in the positions of decision making. Because, you know, even us as managers, those of us who've been managers for a while, the manager has a boss too, and that manager has a boss too. And ultimately, some decisions are not even in the manager's hands. Sometimes they're up in the upper management's hands. And I think part of the reason why some decisions have been very, some decisions towards us have been left out of the conversation is, one, because there's no one there to vouch for us, as Keaton said in his comment, I see in the chat here, no one in the position to vouch for us. And number three, fear of too much Black representation in corporate. That's a very real thing. I think there's almost this idea that if Black people get into a space, they're either going to make it worse or they're going to change it so much that it's not, yeah, it's just not going to be, it's not going to be what we want it to be. And I think that's the thing that needs to be challenged. What is the thing that we want it to be? Is it just, you know, the old boys club? Is that really what it is? Because if that's the case, then communicate that and just stick to that so that nobody has this idea that, you know, I can move up, but really I can't. And also number three, you know, this idea that work is white space. Like, no, work is not white space. Everybody goes to work. Everybody shares this space. Some of us are in certain positions and specialized roles, but ultimately the one thing that every human being pretty much has in common is work. And we need to realize work is not white space. Work is just the space that we all share, but we need to be able and be more comfortable in bringing those perspectives and being okay with challenging people on their way of thinking and not feeling bad about challenging people, because ultimately, if we don't start doing this, nothing's ever really going to change.
Kev, excellent point, man. Excellent point. I think for ourselves, we need to celebrate ourselves more, right? As all together, like, love what we do. I think we should. I think there is a network, I believe. It's always good to kind of, you know, Black aviation professionals, you know, to get together. I think there's an associate. I got to figure that out, but it'd be nice to do that so we can celebrate us and our achievements and kind of create a stronger network where we can actually have this conversation, keep it further. But not only that, but bring it out more. I know at our company had this diversity inclusion call, and it's just starting. So I'm glad to see that it's there. The conversation being started. You know, people coming out and communicating, you know, in a safe environment, what they feel some of the challenges are. And I'd like to see that keep moving forward so we can continue that conversation and not internalize it, letting the true colors kind of come out. And that's when you're going to be able to shine.
Thanks, Mike. You bring up some good points. I know we're time. We've lost a lot of time there, but I think everyone had some great points tonight. Just a few things I want to touch on just before we end the call. When it comes to creating safe spaces, I think it's important that um, uh, black black professionals in any workspace recognize that this is a learning path, right? And as much as this can take this can be an emotional burden for a lot of us, where we have to uncover a lot of the racism that we've experienced in the past. It's also equally as important to ensure that we can allow someone else to make mistakes, especially our white colleagues. We want to make sure we can bring them into this conversation. And the only way we can bring them into this conversation is by allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable, right? They will face a lot of discomfort in this because this is going to be new to them. But we must almost live a healthy distance, if I may say, where honestly, our objective should be making sure that we can get to understand each other a whole lot. Blacks and whites don't understand each other much. And the reason why is because we don't talk about race as much. So some of the key pointers is just a mere acknowledgement. Let's acknowledge that we actually have a problem. And this goes back to both blacks and whites. Let's acknowledge that we've been complicit as blacks. Let's acknowledge that we've been perpetuating the same system over and over again. But let's also try and make sure that whites understand and acknowledge that there's a problem just based on the outcomes. If we're not represented, and if someone has a misguided concept or misconception onto why Terry will be rocking his locks, or for some reason someone thinks that you may have a couple of rolls on you, let's try and explore that. Let's try and make sure that we can have that conversation, and we put them on a spot, but allow them to explain themselves. And once you level with someone else and you get to that comfortable space where you can actually start talking about these things, then maybe we can uncover where they got these perceptions from, right? And as soon as we've created a safe space, perhaps just develop a framework of how you're actually gonna create the safe space, right? Because you're gonna have a lot of hurt. You're gonna have a lot of hurt, and you're gonna be hurting a lot of people. People are gonna get their feelings hurt, and people will be afraid to be judged. So we gotta make sure we allow that space for white colleagues for them to get to really understand blacks, right? And the next thing that is that was on my notes here is just um, being honest and having an intentional commitment. You cannot drag anyone into this. You can't force anyone to see racism. You really gotta. It's almost like a relationship. You can't. People cannot fix what they don't feel. Do you see what I'm saying? So we gotta be really patient with these with racism. It is a fairly complex issue, but we must be able to bridge the gap with the others. By the end of the day, we must be able to have our white colleagues acknowledge the fact that it is a problem. And then obviously learning. We're gonna have to do a lot of learning and a lot of patience with the learning. Um, you will hear a lot of weird things from your white colleagues, and you're gonna have to be okay with it for a bit. You're gonna have to be okay with it. For them to learn, you gotta allow them to make mistakes, right? Um, and most importantly for corporations, just reconciliation and healing, creating that space. Back to your point, Mike. The first thing that you want to do is just create awareness and having that first discussion, initiating discussion. And finally, action. Like, we're gonna need people to commit to this and understand what the value is in these type of discussions. The more you talk about it, the easier it becomes. I think, Terry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing 100% with what you're saying. I think a lot of the issues is a lack of education and us being hurt over so many years. I think we need to understand that who we are dealing with, right? Their actions may be because of a lack of knowledge. They're not aware of what they're doing. They don't understand what they did is wrong. They don't realize that this is something I shouldn't say, shouldn't do, because they don't understand who we are. So if our biggest goal right now is to get out there and educate people, let them see who we are, let them see, look, we're just like everybody else. We might talk a little different. We have a little different style. You know what? Our hairstyles are different, but there's nothing, you know, we're all human beings. And to me, that's just, once again, educating. So I think at the end of the day, that's something we got to follow. We need to always remember that, you know what, people fear what they don't know. We got to get them to know who we are. And once again, I think we have to also not become comfortable with conversation. Okay, the first thing we're gonna converse. I own company A. I see people are getting upset. You know what? Let's start some conversation. Fantastic. I want to know what happens after the conversation, right? To me, conversation is great to a certain point, right? I'm going to express my pain, and I hope if you're listening to me, you can understand where my pain is coming from. But at the end of the conversation, I want to know, what are you going to do, you know, to help alleviate some of my pain? Or are you just listening to me to be able to say, hey, well, you know what? We're doing something by having conversations. So everybody should feel good, because if asked, well, what is it that we're doing? Well, we're having these conversations. But where does it go after that? Right? We need to walk the walk. Talk the talk is fine, but it has to come to a pace where we're putting policies, procedures, and even penalties in place to ensure that everybody has an equal opportunity to advance, right? And until the level up here, who are the policymakers, right, decide, like you said, Kevin, we admit there's an issue. Number two, we talk, we understand what's going on. Number three, we understand we need to take action, and we put policy, procedures, and protocols along with penalties in place to ensure every level of the hierarchy is a true representation of all employees working, right? So until we get to that top, right, it's going to be a lot of conversation. We need more than just a conversation.
So those are really good points, man.
Very good points, Terry.
Really good points.
Bring up some really great points. And I just want to make sure that we all understand it's almost impossible for us as Blacks to achieve equality. What we want is equity.
Equity.
That's where
I
we
was
want to
just
get to.
thinking the same thing, Kev.
Okay?
It's just
It's,
thinking
it's
the same
almost
thing.
impossible to achieve equality. We want
Equity.
to make sure we have equitable access to all these opportunities, right? And if we have seen a dramatic change with gender equality, right? We haven't seen for sisters, we haven't seen for the Black women, but we've seen it for white women. We've seen a large investment in gender equality, and I think corporations can make investments in racial equity, and it should be accountable. And if you're going to tell me that we're going to be having a conversation, it better be intentional. Because at the end of the day, if it's not intentional and I don't see the outcomes, because the judge should be the outcomes. If you don't see the outcomes,
Just talk.
then there's intention there. Period.
But Kevin, oh, sorry, Terry, you go ahead.
No, and look, I fully 100% agree. I mean, I was just looking at when the whole Black Lives Matter started to kick up, right? You saw a lot of companies go out there and say, hey, guess what? We're going to remove the Aunt Jemima.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to start getting rid of the Uncle Ben. To me, you know what that is? That's publicity.
Yep.
Okay. It's fantastic that you're going to use this, you know, to publicize because everybody's listening right now.
Should have
But
done
at
that
the end of the
before.
day, what government agencies are you lobbying for change, right? Great, you're going to remove Aunt Jemima? Fantastic. But outside of that, right, the proof to me is that, you know what? I'm going to take the next step and I'm going to start lobbying governments for change, right? To me, that's where the change is going to take place. You know, don't throw these little things to make everybody happy and give the impression that we are doing something. Do something that's going to actually promote change.
I was gonna just, I'm so glad you went first, Terry. because, you know, I was going to say more or less the same thing. And I think maybe just kind of bring it back into maybe the aviation world, Kevin, because I think everybody agrees that there's not enough of us in terms of representation. You know, just also considering the fact, just hiring a Black person doesn't mean you're a diverse environment. Just hiring a bunch of Black people to go into a particular role doesn't mean that you're diverse, especially if it's not a continued pattern, right? So, like I said, I talk a lot about the effect that it has on one's mentality. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't want to speak conclusively, but I'm just telling you how it makes me think about practice. So I think that's what Terry's saying is so critical, because if we're really going to talk about change, conversation is important, but we also need action. And I think action doesn't necessarily just mean, oh, let me just go appease the needs, the immediate needs of the populace by, you know, whetting their appetite by saying, hey, look, we hired 3 new Black managers, or hey, we brought some new, or even this is something new, that's something that's also happening now. A lot of companies now have a diversity and inclusion manager position. I've seen a lot of those pop up on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, they're hiring a whole bunch of like Black people or Indian people or other kinds of people that aren't necessarily white to fill these roles. Surprise, surprise. But then for me, the one issue I don't think we've talked a lot about is tokenism, right? So what happens now is that you end up having the token Black person or the token colored person in a particular role, not necessarily because they're going to add value, not necessarily because you really want them or need them, but just because to say, hey, look, we're doing something. So for me, guys, if I'm just going to be 100% candid and frank, it's just, look, let's be real. It's not that I'm holding my breath to say, hey, I'm expecting the aviation world to change because we're demanding change. I realize this is a process that's actually beyond this industry. It's a human thing. There's a human problem. There's an element of humanity. That needs to be addressed. But moreover, I think that we need to realize that there are still a bunch of small wins that need to happen before we can start expecting bigger change. And I think part of that is us having very clear discussions, firstly, but then also following that up with continued, you know, like continued, I don't want to say pressuring, but continued like movements towards seeing change actually happen on a practical level, starting maybe even from the front line all the way up. I don't know, but ultimately something has to happen that isn't just a means to an end, if you will.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about accountability, right? I mean, this whole issue is systemic. It was built into society, all right? And it's funneled down into almost every industry that exists. It's a systemic issue. 400 years of slavery you've had, okay? All that is going to take time to go away. I mean, at this particular point, what can we do? Well, number one, we need to remain united, because at the end of the day, if you voice your complaint by yourself, you're the angry Black man. We probably won't see you around next week, right? As Kevin mentioned early, we need safe havens, right? We need groups. You know, they have a urban pilots network, which is a bunch of pilots that support each other and discuss issues and try to, you know, to give scholarships to encourage younger kids to get into the aviation industry, right? In the United States, they have a group of doctors that do the same thing. They go into playgrounds and explain to people that, hey, you know what? You could be a doctor. Some of the kids there think that when they will turn on the TV, success is only shown with rappers or drug dealers. They don't realize that there's other professions out there, or basketball, exactly, that they don't realize that, you know what, there's other ways for us to be lucrative. You know, we need these type of organizations so we have a place to turn to so that we don't stand alone when we have to speak up. Should we have a group of lawyers? Why not? You run into a problem, maybe you're afraid to go to HR because HR is owned by the company. You don't know what kind of conversation is going to happen at that point that might, you know, end up in hurting you at the end of the day. But if there was a group of Black professionals, lawyers that decided, hey, you know what, we're going to take on pro bono cases of these where you could express yourself and have them represent you. Now you've taken it to a whole nother level. It's gotten uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable, but now you're not by yourself,
Yep.
right? And we need this type of unity.
Network support.
Network, support each other. You get into an issue at work, call your buddy, have him right next to you. Remain calm, cool, collected, always polite, but have a witness, because when the police show up, at the end of the day, that quick visual of what we're accustomed to seeing on cops all the time, well, you know what? You're the problem, where that might not be the case. Have people with you, protect yourself, but remain calm, cool, collected, and polite at all times.
Yeah, those are great points. I think what we really need to lean on is we got to lean on one another. We got to have a lot more of these conversations and find comfort in being a group of Black people, because the concept there is, and the perception out there is, what's with all the brothers together? What's going on today? I'm not sure if you guys ever heard that. I mean, you'll always hear someone always make a comment, and it will always come off as, okay, that's a little weird, because I've never gone into any corporate boardroom and said, what's with all the white brothers in here today? I'll be saying that every single day, right? But we're so accustomed to the fact that anytime we get together, someone's gonna call us out.
Or a threat.
Right?
It's a threat.
Exactly. So we got to get comfortable with being seen together, and having honest conversations about our livelihoods. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones who are hurting. So I think it's very important that we start having conversations in every single level of the organization. If there are Black people in HR, we better start talking to Black people in HR, because they see things very different from white people. And for us to make that bridge and have that connect, we just got to have a lot more conversations. At the end of the day, we really don't understand each other, and we got to have some time invested to understand each other. And I think, Ricardo, you mentioned a point early on. A lot of companies are going out there, and we see a lot of tokenism now. So how do we approach tokenism? We gotta be considerate of the fact that companies are also going out there and trying to create access. If we feel that a certain policy is not really going to drive effective change, we got to be able to speak up. Because I'm of the, in my equitable access is by having the outcomes speak for themselves. At the end of the day, if I'm not represented in the corporate boardroom, if I'm not a decision maker, if I'm not really part of the conversation, if I'm not given time to be, if I'm not given room to participate in the conversation, then it's exclusive. It's not inclusive. That's the bottom line. The outcome should be equitable, period. It should not be, okay, we're going to be investing $2 million and we still have the same outcomes. What are we really doing? What policy framework are you putting in your workplace to ensure that everyone's got an equitable opportunity, right? Is everyone really up to the same speed? Does everyone really understand the intention? Are we all speaking the same language? And if there are people who are hesitant towards achieving equitable access for your Black colleagues, what's holding them back? Let's have those conversations. Sometimes we really need to have these conversations for us to really understand ourselves, right? I think we're about 38, an hour and a half in for an hour call, so I'm going to try and wrap this up. So let's go to a closing thoughts. I mean, Mike, you want to say something?
Hey man, like I said from day one, I appreciate this because I just feel a lot better, and I don't know why we didn't do this sooner. It's refreshing to hear the different perceptions, your colleagues, different departments and whatnot, different airlines, just to see what they've gone through and what we could do moving forward to kind of, feel better and strategize on how we overcome this when it does arise. And if we have experienced it and what we did at that particular time. So I know it kind of should have done this a lot longer before everything evolved this at the beginning of this year in May, but I feel a lot better. It's kind of off the chest. It's just the beginning. And I think like I said before, the main thing that I'd like to see have happen is more of a network of folks that we can check in with and see what we can do to move forward, to be the change, to drive it forward, to encourage diversity, and to see more for our companies moving forward and being on the cusp, driving force behind it.
Thanks, Mike. Terry, do you want to add something?
Look, the aviation's a fantastic industry, great place to be. You know, there are opportunities. It's just getting to the point where these opportunities are equally dispersed amongst everybody. Once again, it's kind of a catch-22 because once again, is it even fair for us to say we have an issue in this particular place when it was built in to society? It's almost like it's gonna happen, right? Listen, first we need to just become comfortable with ourselves. And I think that's one of the big problems is that we're not, right? I mean, we have our women who are afraid to wear their natural hair because it might not be seen as acceptable, right? I could go in and
He's frozen now.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Ryan, you want to pick up from Terry?
Yeah, so I'll continue on that same thought that Terry was saying. Then I wrote this down last night when I was thinking about it. Valuing ourselves and teaching each other and generations after us to value themselves to the point that you're not changing yourself. You're not trying to conform to a particular idea of what you're supposed to be, but you having value. I'm just gonna read what I have. It says teaching ourselves to have value, true value of themselves, to the point that when you see something that doesn't align with your value, you're not afraid to stand up, speak up, and even walk away. Right? So in this, to the point we're not afraid to be uncomfortable. Right? A lot of times we are afraid to be uncomfortable. To tell you the truth, I can say that of myself. We're afraid to be uncomfortable, so I won't bring it up. This doesn't act. I don't like what you're saying. I don't like what's happening, but because I don't want to be uncomfortable, I won't bring it up. And because I feel like I'm gonna have to be on defense mode after that, I'll just kind of conform to what's happening right now and let it be that way. Let it pass and just go with the flow as per se. But I think one of the solutions, because like we said, it's not an issue of just aviation. And so one of the solutions I think is, like I said, educating ourselves and teaching ourselves to not to be afraid to be uncomfortable, not to be afraid to be yourself, regardless of what's happening or the circle that you're in. You still got to be yourself. At the end of the day, Kevin said something earlier, you can't be truly productive if you're not yourself, right? You're holding back your true self. So you're holding back a certain part that you could offer because you're separating and trying to conform to a particular idea of what you're supposed to be, or trying to conform to something just so you could fit in and fit the mold. Definitely we need to have support, and things like this, what we're doing right now, are things we need more of. Being able to talk about these issues and having support, and people empowering one another to say, hey, you're having an issue, okay, I'm going to help you out with that issue, and making those connections, cross connections with other areas, with other the word is slipping right now, whether it be lawyers, doctors, so that when you're having an issue, somebody can say, oh, I've had that experience, here's what I did, or here's what we can do, let me help you with that. Definitely, I think having support, having something of our own where we are not dependent, necessarily on the other person to make the change, but we are here and having our own way, having our own thing, striving to make that change. Not saying, well, it's up to them to make the change for me. No, I have my own thing going towards to make that change. Yeah, and I think what we need to, like we talk about representation in higher positions, not just representation, but like true leaders. And when I say that, I mean like not just somebody that's filling a position, because I think leadership is such a big thing. Because you can have one person, just one person that looks like us in a position of power, but if that person is like a strong leader and is able to pull, because like the leadership, you're supposed to be pulling others with you, right? That's how I say it. You're supposed to be pulling others with you. You make disciples of yourself, so when you're gone, you've got another 10 people now that can fill the same role that you've been doing, right? So I definitely believe that's one of the things we need to have, like true, like strong leaders that are not just looking out for themselves, but saying, hey, I'm in a position, let me pull others up with me.
Those are some really good points, Ryan. I really appreciate you sharing that. And to your point, when you talk about trying to make sure that we can pull each other up, I talk about privilege in a recent article that I wrote a few days ago, and simply it's finding the privilege in you, right? We're all afforded a type of privilege, and we got to recognize the privilege. So what is your privilege? Understand exactly what opportunity you have for someone else. And I think by default, a large majority of Black folks are under the assumption sometimes that they don't have a privilege. As much as I may not have a privilege in this society that I'm not white, the color of my skin, there's some things that I can do to help my community, which is simply, which goes back to me really understanding what my privilege is. And if you're propelled to a position of power or a leadership position where you think you can make an impact to your community or your fellow Black colleagues, then why not? And I don't think a lot of us are doing enough of that, which turns into a situation where someone becomes more of a gatekeeper than being someone that uplifts. I think we need to start doing a lot more of that, where we recognize the positions that we're in and understand that there's someone else that can be afforded the same opportunity, and show them exactly how you got to where you are, right? You remember, there's so many things that afford as a privilege. Just having a family will afford you a privilege that a lot of people don't have, right? Having a job, having an opportunity at a large corporation, right? We got to start thinking about these things to bring people in. And it's the only way we can propel our community to be part of the conversation. Because if there's not enough of us, and I can almost go back to like when I joined aviation, there weren't that many people. And I can see Terry smiling, and he probably looked around and couldn't see anyone that looked like him. I mean, it almost confines you to this box, and it's almost so hard to explain sometimes. And you want to see yourself represented, but there's not enough of us trying to seek opportunities within the same platform. So what can we do about it, right? And I think some of these conversations help, and especially forming associations. To your point, Terry, I think you mentioned the urban pilot networks and so forth. These kind of platforms really help us bring our people in, right? I think Ricardo, you had a point there.
Yeah, just really quickly, I just want to kind of resound, the idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that has a lot of reach, not just in conversation, but also in practice. And I think if we start doing that, we should also find that, some of those biases that you spoke about earlier, Kevin, we shouldn't be comfortable with them either. right? So it's not just about pointing out what's the issue in somebody else's life, but also what are some of the things that I have been comfortable with within myself, and challenging myself to come out of those molds. Because I think ultimately the goal should be not to make another people group feel bad about my situation so they respond. It should be that we come together and seek to understand each other, because I don't want white people to think bad about black people, and I don't want black people to continue holding certain stereotypes about white people. Ultimately, I want us to come together and try to understand each other. And ultimately, whether that means more roles get created, or whether that means more opportunities get created, or whatever the result is, that's not as important to me as opposed to actual movement towards some sort of change. Because where we're at right now, clearly is not the ideal. It's not the principal way that we want to operate. And I think that's part of the reason why we're having this discussion. I also truly believe that, you know, conversations like these are good, networks like these are good. And I think that these definitely should continue. And I think also what we should do is, you know, like, for example, like I know MD and RJ, you know, like sometimes when we're on shift together, like we have those moments in the office where we're talking it up for like half an hour about like real stuff that has nothing to do with work. But it's just a way of building relationship. It's building if anything, it's more so about building comfortability with each other, because I think sometimes we really don't realize that in some ways work is kind of set up to keep people away from each other, because you're out there seeking out your own and trying to get yourself advanced and making yourself look good, when in fact, in a lot of ways, corporate structures have been set up where you actually need your partner to actually do well so that you can do well, so that at the end of the day, you know, for example, like when bonus time comes around and certain objectives weren't met, maybe you did your part, but maybe your colleague wasn't properly set up for success. So then, you know, we're talking about bringing people up with us. We also need to start looking at each other as colleagues and teammates, not just because of the org chart, but because, like, look, we work together. Those flights won't get pushed if we don't work together. And I know that it seems so basic and simple, but the reality is, in a lot of ways, these organizations that we work with, a lot of ways they're inherently broken because they don't promote the team culture that's necessary for people to even come together. So we're talking about bringing people to the table. Where's the table? Where's the table? We need to make sure that's not ambiguous anymore. We need to actually start talking about how do people come together. Because I can tell you right now, from my experience in the aviation industry, it's very fragmented, and it depends who you talk to. And things are not healthy. Those things are not healthy. They may be the present reality in a lot of ways, but they're not healthy because we're not defining where the table is. So now, because we're so fragmented, it's hard for us to even know where is the meeting ground. So I think that's what needs to be clearly defined as well. And also realizing, especially people of color, we need to realize, like, look, man, certain things have been set up against us. Certain things were set up without us at the table. Let's just be real and frank about it. And let's start working together. I know, like, simple little things, like I know when RJ and I are on duty, one of us is getting dinner. I already know that. We already know what's gonna run. By 8 p.m., I'm calling him, RJ, what are we eating? You haven't called me yet. I'm going. If you don't go, I'm gonna go. And just little things like that. Or MD, like, what do you got for dinner, bro? Or, like, you know, tell me about your family. Just stuff like that, just to get us comfortable with being teammates and colleagues.
I want to touch on something, Ricardo. Remember those great moments when, you know, when things work out and we communicate and share? You know, we had some great times. RJ, myself, Mikey, you know, I need help. And it's like, you know what? Do my due diligence and say, how are we doing over here? Then that help comes your way. And I communicate, I'm sending so-and-so. And it all works out beautifully. And that's the camaraderie and the trust. And obviously I'll let you know if I can or cannot do it, right? Because that's just the way it is, and you understand it. But that's the beauty of having that working together, not just you winning for yourself. We're winning collectively and sharing. And that builds like immense trust. And that's why we have such a great bond.
And the context of that is important too. sorry, Kevin, I don't mean to take much more time, but it's just the context of that is significant. When MD's on duty, I'm all right because I already know MD's gonna send me 2-3 people. I know when RJ's on duty, he's got my back. If I miss a call, he's taking it for me. I know that because we've built that. But that's because we know where our meeting table's at. And part of that is because we're Black. But I'm saying that doesn't really do anything for me outside of my Black circles. I need to start defining the meeting table, the meeting place with those persons on the other side who don't necessarily know how to interact or communicate with me.
Yep.
It's one step at a time, guys.
Yeah.
We're gonna get there. It's one step at a time, man. But you're 100% on point.
I know. It's leadership is something that you can't quite. I don't think leadership knows any color. It's either you've designed it, you got it, you've built it, you've reinforced it, you believe in it, and you end up having it or not, right? I mean, I know a ton of leaders who just have no leadership, and it's just a paintbrush. It's the way it goes, right? But I think we need to lean on one another, and where we fall short, don't be afraid to reach out to your colleagues. And if I could do anything for any one of you at any point in time, and I did it many times, I do it over and over again. It's just having that almost honesty in yourself to know exactly when things are going wrong and when things are going right, and just being able to convey that message to your colleagues, right? So, I mean, but I think to your point, Ricardo, I think we should be leaning a lot more on us, a whole lot more. And those little things make all the difference. Just those little gestures and, appreciation and, being there, having someone's back, go along. So I think we got to do a lot more of that. Terry, did you want to say anything for closing thoughts?
No, I fully 100% agree. Listen, at one point I thought I was a problem. I'm like, what is wrong with me that, what's going on? But you know what? Sitting here talking to you guys, and I'm sure all of us have felt the pain at some point, I'm saying, okay, you know what? It's not me. It's fine. It's not me. And I think a lot of us beat ourselves up silently. I mean, I go to work, I put in 200%. I'm pretty sure when you go to work, you're doing the same thing. Why? Because you feel this is what you have to do. And at the end of the day, when you don't see the fruits of your effort, you're wondering like, well, what's wrong with me? What more could I have done? But you know what? It's forums like this, that allows me to take the deep breath and say, okay, you know what? It's not me. It's a bigger problem than, than this circle right here. But I have brothers that I could lean on, right? And if we stay united, guys, and focused, right? We'll get there, man. 100% we'll get there. Just, it's not going to be overnight.
It's funny how we have to compensate for trying to prove the world and the color of our skin. And so a majority of Black professionals always doing 200%, while their white colleagues sometimes don't even have to put in 40%, and they get away with it. It's just the nature of the game. But we got to have this. We know this is very complex. It's not going to happen overnight. Systemic racism will take a whole time to fix, but there's simple steps that we can take, and I think we're on the right path. There's one, and that's pretty much having a platform where we can have a safe space where you can bounce off suggestions and thoughts and perspective about what you think about your Black colleagues and your Black friends, and the current status, and just speaking openly and candidly, where someone, whoever's on the receiving end, understands what you're saying. You see what I'm saying? It's that recognition that makes all the difference when you have someone who's actively listening to what you're saying and they really get it and they understand it. When as opposed to you sitting with your white colleagues and giving you the looks, and you're not sure how your message is coming off, or you see what I'm saying?
I feel like I gotta use a whole new dictionary.
Listen,
I gotta use a whole new dictionary, man.
Because some understand, right? You'd be surprised. There's quite a few that do understand, but there's some of them, like, you only know what you're exposed to, right? And this is why I can't blame anybody for anything. Yeah. I just have to say, if you're raised a certain way, There's certain things you're exposed to. There's certain things you don't know. I've had friends come to me and say, what, cops give you a hard time? And I'll say, well, listen, when you get stopped by a police officer, does he ask you if the cars belong to you? He goes, no, he usually asks me, is everything okay, sir? Right? Well, I've never had a police officer ask me if the car belongs to me, right? You can't blame somebody for something they don't know. But what we can do is educate on what we go through so that they can understand the pain we're facing. And that's about the most we can do at this particular point, is just try to gain that understanding.
Yeah, the most we can do is just try and educate them on it. I mean,
education, yeah.
They will never really understand 100%.
No.
But we got to make that effort to make sure that they at least understand some of the concepts. And just to bounce off Ricardo's point there, just let's learn how to live in that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Let's learn how to get uncomfortable and just live in that healthy distrust life, right?
I think we've been living with discomfort. I think all of us at some point has been living with that discomfort, you know.
No,
but I think it's a time like
the conversation with our white colleagues.
Yeah, explain to people that we're uncomfortable.
Most of us are not really. Yeah, we're not really willing to go there because we know what someone's thinking. You know, when you have to second guess how the message is being received. It's almost like that awkward conversation with a wife. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I'm hoping I'm not going to.
Hey, look, hey, to be clear, and I think you guys already know I'm a very candid person. For me, I know how to speak white professional, and I know how to speak Black. And I think what I mean by that is not necessarily that Black is not professional. It's just that I know how to speak white professional when it's needed. In other words, there's a perception of me when I'm in a particular role that you almost feel pressured to have to be in a certain way. And that's, I think, what I'm talking about is we don't necessarily have to do that to get ahead or it's just being uncomfortable, just being comfortable with the fact that you don't necessarily have to conform due to pressure. Yeah. And that is, I think, there's a strong push. Conform. We want change, but conform to the way that we want you to. It doesn't make sense. It's oxymoronic. It doesn't make any sense. We can't change if we do the same things. That's insanity. But there's a lack of willingness to be comfortable for change. And I think that is, on a practical note, these conversations will help, followed up with and I know it's not going to happen overnight. I know that. But what I'm saying is being resilient is still a very good thing. It's not about the end. It's about what needs to happen for the change to come about.
100%. We got to be authentic. It's as simple as that. Just be authentic. Be yourself. And the change will come with it. Okay, guys, I want to thank you for coming on to this forum. It's been quite informative, and I think we all had some great insights into this conversation, and just starting that conversation in a safe space where we feel we can be candid and honest and open about these kind of interactions with our white colleagues and our workspaces. It makes all the difference. I'm hoping that you're going to take your time to reflect, refresh yourselves, and take a step back and understand exactly what you can do to be part of the change, right? I'm going to have a ton of these forums on an ongoing basis, just to our benefit, and I'm hoping that you guys had some insightful moments out of this forum, right? So I think I'll bring it up to a close. It's been almost 2 hours. And I appreciate
can I just jump in with one thing? Guys, I just wrote down a couple of phrases here just for thought. One of them is express your pain, voice your concern, educate when possible, demand accountability, and stand united. All right? In the back here.
Glad for this forum, glad for the opportunity to speak. Like you said, being able to speak to people that understand what you're saying and can relate gives you the opportunity to go deeper into the conversation, because when you're talking, the person can't relate. You can only say so much. and you can't really go as deep as you'd like to see if you can deal with some of those issues. So appreciate it, Kevin. I think this is going to be a great thing.
Very good. Thank you. Michael, any closing thoughts?
No, just dittoing what everyone is saying. You know, it's really about, you know, you kind of, when we're talking about this, we overstand, if you know what I'm saying. You know, so it's like we kind of know on a high level exactly what we're going through, which is great without even saying anything. Terry, I want those quotes. Send me those quotes.
Will do, brother. Will do.
Mantra, but
I'll fire it off to Kevin. He'll distribute to everybody.
All right. Yeah,
how's that?
It's a great thing to look at and to challenge yourself every day. How can I affect people? You know, I've always had it in the back of my mind too. I look for talent, and for people that have that talent but are kind of struggling, they're kind of like plateauing. They had the talent, but something was off. Having that moment to pull them aside and go for a walk and say, "Hey, man, you know, you have some exceptional talent. Where do you want to go?" Right? And quite often we're caught up in the operation, but you need those moments to make a difference in someone's lives. Where do you want to go, and get them on to getting into the workplace and being heard and being on the radar, and, you know, set them up for succession and promote, right? Because you've been there yourself. Like we say, we need someone to vouch for us. We need someone to identify the talent. You could be struggling with a lot of things, but when you have someone in your back corner for you that will fight for you and see that you have talent, that's what we need to do. And that's how we start growing and building and creating that network. That's it. That is leadership, identifying talent, cultivating talent, and growing together, right? And having that following. So that's where we need to be at. Everywhere we go, make a difference. All right.
Very good.
So, love the forum. Love speaking to everybody here. You know what? Weight off the chest, and, you know, we can talk. But that's it. No silence. It's talk.
Thank you, Mike. I must say, I've had an opportunity to work with every single one of you. We gave each other a chance to speak our minds, and that really loved the. That's what I really admired, is that we actually gave each other a chance to talk about these issues and many other issues that we talked about in the past, right? And I can say for sure, like in the past, I've had a great time working with Ricardo, Michael, Terry, and Ryan, and I think it was informative for me. It was almost like a life journey, just having those interactions and knowing that someone's got your back. That made all the difference. Ricardo, looks like you want to say something, man. Go ahead, go for it.
No, I have nothing constructive to say. Like, I'm underdressed, you know, like that's what I'm just realizing, that I didn't come.
Listen, brother, you're you, bro. Don't even think about that, man. Just
like,
I grabbed the shirt, dude. I saw these guys overdressed and I grabbed the shirt right away. That's it.
Like, so Kevin, just next time, you know, put a dress code in the invite, you know, just let me. No, I'm joking. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate this opportunity, and, you know, thanks for letting me share my piece.
And listen, guys, I just wanted to introduce, because I spoke to Kevin earlier about this group called the Urban Pilots Network. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of it, but if you get a moment, Google it. It's an organization I actually joined last year, and the stuff that they're doing for our community in aviation is unreal. Last year I was at their end of year shingdang. They have this thing every year at the end of the year to end the year. And these guys produce scholarships for kids. They have a kids program, right? And these pilots have taken kids to Grenada on charter flights to give them the opportunity. They're trying to encourage them to get into aviation, whether it be safety, dispatch, pilots, or whatever they want. You know, trying to show them that, look, you know what, there's other things you can do. And they've created a scholarship program. Bro, listen, last year when they were announcing all the new pilots, brethren, almost brought me to tears, man. You're seeing young guys come out. So-and-so has just finished his pilot's license. He's right-hand chair, 737 Air Canada. This individual finished their career. They're now flying for Emirates, and they're going through every person. They've graduated, who they're flying with now, brother, and they all look like us. I'm telling you, you're seeing new pilots with locks. You're seeing females, you're seeing everybody there, and these guys helped them with the scholarship. It was like,
Man,
I'm telling you, it was moving. It was moving.
Just so you know, they've
Well,
been around since 2004. So you're aware.
yeah,
They've
I
been around
wish
for a bit.
I
if you
wish
get
that
a
was back
chance.
in my days, man. That was my thing. I
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to be I wanted to be a commercial pilot.
There's
Why?
guys now at our age that are with these guys, and these guys are helping them get their pilot's license. There's a few of them that are coming out this year, and they're not young cats, man. They just got with these guys, and these guys will look. There's no reason you can't be a pilot.
Yeah.
Half the guys are instructors.
Yeah.
They're helping you. When you're going to do your exam, right? These guys that are pilots are sitting with you, helping you and tutoring you to make sure you get through, man.
Yeah.
That's the kind of support.
It's an opportunity.
Incredible bunch of people, man.
The opportunity, because just on another note, I did a documentary about black hockey players, and we wanted to find out the root cause why they're not more. And same with aviation. It's so expensive, and the people might just root it out. I can't do that. Just like, medical school and whatnot. It's so expensive to get your pilot's license. I have a dream of doing that, but to attain that dream, it's so far-fetched. So to have organizations like this to kind of promote or look at the possibilities, whether it's Air Force or whatever it is, to help you along that lines, to have someone to talk to about that is fantastic. To keep that dream alive and to try to get to that dream faster than, as fast as you can.
Oh yeah, they're a strong network. I encourage you to check them out.
Yeah.
Listen, brother, where there's a will, there's a way. If you want it bad enough, you'll get it, man.
There you go.
Done deal.
Yeah.